And this is all quite important stuff as we wrap up the semester here. This is your last lecture. It's the ethics lecture. It's one of my favorite lectures to give because my favorite class I ever taught, no offense to you guys, was ethics one time. And then I never got to teach it again, which maybe that's a bad sign, but I think it's because I went to a different university. But I love teaching ethics. So this week we have the ethics lecture. Now, I talked about this a little bit the last time we had class about how the syllabus is getting changed slightly. Case study 5 is this week because it was supposed to be for the ethics lecture. So we're doing it this week. You have case study 5. I wrote it. It's not too bad. We'll talk about it today. I'll pull it out. You get to see it. We do lecture question 14 today. Next week, per the syllabi, I forgot that I put this on there. I said no class. I had told you all, we'll meet briefly. So what's really going to happen now? Here's the truth. There's no class next week because I said there was no class, but I am recording a video because I need one, you have lecture question 15 next week, so that'll be in the video. And 2, I'm going to do kind of like final stuff about like, here's where you turn in your final project, like, because I'm going to open all that stuff up and I'd be like, here's where you turn it in. Make sure you check for this, that, and this, and make sure everything gets submitted right, and yay. I'm going to be recording that lecture. I mean, I can be in here in person and do that, but it's not going to last very long. It's going to be like 20, 30 minutes. So I'm going to be on campus anyway next week, and I'm going to record that video on campus. If any of you really want to be here or want to hear it in person, you're welcome to. But to be honest, next week is just a get everything submitted, and here's how you do it, and make sure it looks like this and that kind of thing. Because it is, I know some of you guys have tests, and the last week's always a little bit crazy. But there will be a lecture question in that lecture next week. So make sure you watch that video no matter what. Get that video done. But yeah, we're about there. 2 lecture questions, 1 case study. There's a homework for this lecture, but it's not too bad. And then your final project. Now, one thing on the final project before I forget, or 2 things rather. The easier one, tomorrow I meet with the AOL person because your final project has to be submitted individually because it's a university assessment. They like assess a part of your project. That means that they have to set up a special link for it. So tomorrow I meet with her at noon. She comes into my class. She sets the link up, and then you guys can submit your stuff. So as of tomorrow, you can actually submit your final project, but it's not due until, what is it, December 12th? It's the Sunday, right?
Friday.
Is it the Friday? I want to do Sunday. I think December 12th is the Sunday. Is it really?
It has to be due on the Friday.
No, kind of.
Grades are due by Sunday.
Grades are due on Tuesday.
That's for this semester.
Now, I have to submit everything by Tuesday. Yeah. I'll double check that, but that's almost always what it is. Typically, I make everything due Sunday before grades are due because I have to submit grades by Tuesday. But the semester technically ends on Friday. I'll double check all that. But anyway, I'll be able to open it up tomorrow so you guys can do that. The other thing is I have read some people's that have sent me stuff ahead of time, and that's great, and I love to do it. I really do love to do it. One thing that's been a repeat problem is the whole paper's not AI written. I'm not saying that. But there are definitely sections that are like AI generated, or they're heavily using some sort of program to like alter their word structure, which isn't necessarily bad. If it's generative AI, it is bad. But none of the papers that people have sent me have indicated where AI has been used. Per your syllabus, you've got to do that. So at the end, I usually tell people to do it after references. After references, tell me what sections you used AI, what programs you use, just how you use it. It's all about just being transparent, and then you won't get in trouble for it. Even if it's something that I'm like, well, you can't do that, you need to adjust this, that's better than getting a 0. Because the worst thing that happens is I get a paper, I'm reading it, and the marketing section is like all bulleted and marked a certain way, and I can clearly tell that at least AI had a heavy hand in it, and there's no indication in it. And then I run it through these 9 different programs, and they flag it at 85%, 99%, 98%, 97%, 89%. I'm like, all right, I can confidently say you used something. So I need to know, just tell me. So luckily, the program I'm using got pretty updated. It doesn't flag Grammarly as bad anymore. Grammarly was like getting flagged all the time for a while, which technically it's AI, but it's not what I'm worried about. All right, we're going to talk about ethics. Any questions about Final Project? Next week, I'll have all the video on it. It'll be like 20 minutes in and out. So before we really jump into ethics, something happened in the last 48 hours that's really been drawing my attention. And I'm just going to kind of generally talk about it as we get into this ethics lecture, because I think it's interesting, and this is a business class and we're here to learn. And so I'm going to talk about it. In the United States, and pretty much all of humankind, we're like super reactive to things, especially when it comes to ethics. I've noticed something bad happens, and after that bad thing happens, even if we all know it's been going on, then when it gets really, really bad, then we like start making our laws and policies. Like if you think about Enron, you all may know what the SOX Act is, especially if you've taken it in accounting and finance class. The SOX Act basically says we're going to really have strong oversight over your accounting. And for some reason, that wasn't a law beforehand, which is wild. And so Enron was able to get away with everything they got away with because they could just lie, basically, and no one was fact-checking that junk. So they could just lie. And then after they got caught and all that stuff happened, then we changed the laws to regulate it. So we do live in a capitalist society, which means we have very free markets and free reign. But economics will show you that if you're too free reign, you get a development of black market products and projects and stuff, and it actually harms the economy and it harms individuals. So we have laws and regulations to regulate that. And what's been interesting to me lately is what's going on with the NCAA and football. And I'm going to talk about Lane Kiffin a little bit here. So, and not anything negative about him, just about the NCAA as a whole. No, but I won't go, my general point is we're talking about ethics here, and I'm talking about regulations and just what's going on currently and why we're constantly evolving. So when I was in high school playing sports and about to go play sports in college, I remember one day a company, and I'm not going to say which shoe company, came to our coach and said, "Hey, what size does that guy wear?" And they told him, and then I came to my locker, and this company gave me a brand new pair of track shoes, and were like, "Will you wear this at the state meet?" And I was like, "Sure." That's against the law, if you didn't know. I didn't know that. I can't be sponsored because I was an amateur athlete. And so they gave me a free pair of shoes, and I wore that. And then at a different point, a company came and asked if I'd wear a heart rate monitor for their company, and I could keep it, and they would take pictures of me and put it on their stuff. And I said, "Sure." And then I was asked to be on a radio show, and I was. And then when I left, they paid me. And that's all illegal. And I didn't know that. Now, luckily, I didn't get in trouble by the NCAA. But later, I actually ran a little bit, and then I stopped, and then I ran a race, and I wanted a prize. And after I won the prize, a coach at Oklahoma State asked if I would run for them. And then I was like, they found out that I had run in this one race and accepted a reward. And then they were like, "Oh, you can't do that. We would get like massive, you can't run for us. You'll get like massive fines because you're a professional now, right? You can't run for us." And it was a whole thing. And I had no clue. I was so confused. I was like, oh, and I had to like learn all these NCAA rules about amateur and all this stuff. And it was all vague to me, and I have no clue what's going on. So the NCAA was like, for college athletes and in general, had like really strong oversight. But for the athletes, the people that actually kind of get punished, it was like crazy vague. Like you just didn't understand. So when I taught ethics at Oklahoma State, I had a whole section about the NCAA and the stuff that happened to like Terrell Pryor, if you know who that is. Terrell Pryor played college football, very famous person. Everybody in the country knew who he was. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. And he signed a helmet and signed shoes that were auctioned off and made some money on it. And basically, Ohio State and him got destroyed by the NCAA for doing that. And that started this whole like, oh, this is not good. You have, these people shouldn't be allowed to make money. And then it became, oh, this isn't good because these are just young athletes that are famous. You should be able to make money off your fame. Like, what's her name? Livy Dunn? Is that the gymnast girl? Yeah, my daughter talks about her. She makes all her money off her TikTok, right? So the NCAA has gone the opposite direction now and has essentially removed regulation. It's chaos. right now. It is pure chaos. I wish I was running track at this time because I could. I mean, there's no money in track. Nobody has sponsored me. I just got free shoes, but like that's about it. But they have completely gone the other direction and pulled all the regulation. And as a business professor who studies negative behaviors and unethical behaviors, what's happening is interesting now because technically nothing going on is illegal in the NCAA. But some people would argue it's unethical and it's getting worse because there's no regulation happening. And that is like a balancing act. And we'll talk about it throughout this lecture about things that are legal and illegal and how that can be different than things that are ethical and unethical, and how we have laws and regulations to regulate what's ethical and unethical. But that's so difficult because ethics are often subjective to what you think is right and wrong. If you don't know what spurred all this, it's the Lane Kiffin thing. Lane Kiffin, if you don't know, is the head coach for Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is a really good football team. 7th in the country right now, which is a big deal out of about 190 D1 teams. They are incredible. They just made it to the college football playoffs, which is only what, 12 teams now? I think it's 12.
Yes.
It's only 12 teams. So the top 12 teams in the country make it. He has made it to the playoffs. This is elite. And the team, LSU, Louisiana State University, came in and offered him a bunch of money. And he basically is leaving the team right before playoffs. And what's even crazier is because of the new NCAA rules, his whole roster can leave with him. So Ole Miss's football team can just move to LSU. So universities can do that now, right? And as soon as this happened, a bunch of people I know that I get to make these kind of decisions at NCAA just from a long career of being around this stuff are like, we have to stop something. It seems unethical for the head coach of a program. Now, remember, he's worth millions of dollars and tens of millions of dollars for that university, can just be poached mid-season, and just basically that school's going to get wrecked because of that. And LSU may just have they could be national champions next year. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. And I don't want to knock on Lane Kiffin because he's just a dude and you get paid, go where the money's at. Who cares? I'm for it. See, I didn't know that.
His daughter was the one that convinced him to stay at Ole Miss when he re-signed his contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then now she's dating their Mike linebacker, like their star Mike linebacker, who has another year of eligibility.
So she wants him to move to LSU?
Because she's spending all of her time at LSU, and he's
like,
I'll just follow you.
Yeah. As a dad, I'd do it. That's fine. But it's very, very interesting. And it kind of starts this dichotomy of everybody in the world around sports, because again, I love sports, look at this situation and they think that's wrong. And it seems dumb. And if you don't care about sports, it is dumb, to be honest, but it's going to cost these universities millions of dollars and the livelihood of a lot of people. And it's honestly not even LSU, Ole Miss's, or Lane Kiffin's fault, because you just got to play the rules, right? Unless you believe it's their fault and whatever, that maybe it is. But that's why we have regulations, and it's like what's ethical versus legal and not legal. Like, was it really unethical for me to take those shoes when I was in high school so I'd have a pair of running shoes? Like, maybe not. I didn't know, right? But it was technically, it wasn't illegal. It was, I could have been banned from running in high school. But now I don't care. All that stuff's out. If they want to take every award I ever won away, I can care less. I already have the medals. Come get them. I don't care. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. And we're going to talk about ethics a little more finite here. So part one, this is our 4 parts lecture. The last 3 parts are 2 parts are fairly quick. So when I was younger, I had this pretty cool belief, because I watched Saturday morning cartoons. It was awesome. Wake up, I'd watch Yu-Gi-Oh! And then Pokemon, and then the Men in Black series, which was actually pretty good, and Static Shock and Marvel, and it was awesome. I would watch X-Men, that's what it was. I'd watch all that, and I had this belief that there are these giant evil corporations with evil people whose jobs and like life is revolved around doing horrible things. And I was like, that's how the world works. There are just bad people out there. And then I got older. I was like, no, that's dumb. That's not true. There's no just pure evil bad people out there in companies trying to do bad things. And then I got older, and I got my PhD, and I was like, holy crap, there are companies that are just out there just doing evil, bad things on purpose. And that's wild to me. So I kind of made a full 360 here. And came all the way back to where I started. So these are some famous cases up here. Anybody, you want me to talk about it? Which of these companies you want me to talk about up here?
I'm a little biased.
Okay, pick two.
Volkswagen and Apple.
Volkswagen and Apple. Okay, we'll talk about Volkswagen and Apple. That's good. Pfizer always gets touchy. Goodrich killed a person, so. But they got close to killing a person. We'll talk about Volkswagen. Do you guys know about their false admissions test that they did? You do? You do? Do you? It's not as commonly known as you would think. A lot of people don't know this story, and it was wild. They got a really good marketing campaign about covering it up. So, Volkswagen, if you didn't know, there are laws about how much emissions your car can emit, right? And the way they do it is when you produce a new model of vehicle, they come in and they test it. And they test your emissions, and they make sure it reaches a certain level. It has to be so low, right? Because we don't want to harm the environment. Volkswagen had developed a pretty cool car, right? And it worked. It was great. The problem was everybody wants cars that are nice on emissions because it makes you feel good. But also, you don't want your car to feel sluggish. You want your car to feel fast and zippy and fun to drive. Well, that's really, really difficult because the more powerful and quick your car is, typically, the more emissions it has. So Volkswagen had this pretty cool car, but the problem was it would fail emissions tests if they were to test it. So they developed a microchip, and I used to know the more ins and outs of exactly what it did. There's a bunch of documentaries that explain it. But basically what it did was they put it in the car, and if the car's steering wheel was set to a certain position, and the car went through a series of accelerations and decelerations, all things that would simulate a testing environment, the chip would flip on and essentially power down the car. So it would release less emissions. It'd be less powerful, it would pass test. Now, if it wasn't in the testing environment, chip flips off, unregulated, the car just takes off. So when the car was tested, it passed all of its tests because the chip flipped on and made the car less than what it was. And then when the consumer got the car, they would be happy in their brains thinking that they're not producing emissions, they're doing great, and the car is flying around the road and feels fantastic. They actually got busted because of an engineering team at West Virginia who developed a way to test emissions while driving. So they could hook it up to your car and then drive your car and actually test your emissions. And they showed that the car was not just producing a little bit above regulation, but several times over it. Now, the craziest part about this is when West Virginia got the results, they turned it over to the California Health and Environment Review Board, I think is what they are. And they looked into it and basically said, yes, Volkswagen falsified these test results. And then Volkswagen admitted it. They were just putting chips in their cars, knowing it was illegal, knowing that this was breaking the law. It was crazy to me. And you can go to the dealership right now and buy their cars still. And they just blatantly did this, right? Now, I have to pick on Apple. Now, I will say this because I have somebody in the audience here who works for Apple. Every single large company I can tear down about something they've done. And what I mean by that is if they're on the Fortune 100 list, I promise they have some kind of scandal in their history. It is just definitive. I'm going to talk about Apple slowing down their batteries, just letting you know. So what Apple did was they actually got busted by a Reddit user, which is hilarious. Apple was accused of slowing down their older models of phones to get you to buy a new phone. That was the belief, right? So, and now obviously Apple said they weren't doing that. A Reddit user who was very inclined essentially put up all their phone specs and were able to live track their phone's data, like how fast it's running, what it's doing. And then they let the update come out. When the new phone's released, the update came out and their phone was drastically slowed. And they showed this across multiple models. And it was just a Reddit user that was like, look, the update is slowing your phone down gradually. And it's to force people to buy other phones, right? So they got sued. Now, Apple's claim, obviously, is that It's just that the update essentially takes more power and they want them all to run on the same level. They lost the lawsuit because they didn't disclose it to users. So they knew it would slow your phone down, but they didn't say anything. And the court case proved that they had made tens of millions of dollars of consumers that bought a new phone because their phone had slowed down and they were just trying to get one that would work. And that's when iPhones developed the, what do you call it? The reputation for like they only last for a couple of years and then they slow way down. And they've definitely beat that. Like we just said before class started, my wife's or my daughter's phone has worked for 5 years fantastically, right? And it's because of this lawsuit. They got busted, cost millions of dollars. So boom. So Apple got in trouble for blatantly slowing down iPhones and not telling anybody. Volkswagen was falsifying emissions tests. Enron was falsifying their books to pretend like they were being successful and they weren't. Goodwrench falsified a brake. They developed a brake for the Air Force, and they cheated in the test, and it caused the brake, when it got into actual manufacturing, it caused a jet in the Air Force to crash because the brake froze and locked up, and Goodwrench knew it would do that, but they wanted to get their contract out on time. Pfizer got in trouble pre-COVID, 2015, 2016, for faking test results. They were writing false results and posting them to get products through. So, and that's terrible. In science, there have been professors while I have been a professor that have had all of their research struck in and have been barred from working at any university for falsifying test results. And Pfizer was essentially writing fake results for their tests so that they could get stuff through, which is incredibly easy to do, and that's scary. In fact, in all the research I've done, I've always wondered, how would anybody ever catch me if I was to cheat? And once you know how to do it, it'd be so easy. So these are just a handful of cases. But like I said, pretty much any business I can bust for some sort of famous ethical lapse. Some ethics by the numbers. 56% of American employees believe their employer embraces ethics and corporate values. That's actually not bad, I will say. It's gone slightly down because that number came right at the start of COVID. I am just at the point now where I get to update my numbers. That's my plan this next semester, is to update a lot of my numbers because they were dumb during COVID. They all got weird. The Howe Institute of Society found in 2022 that 88% of employees believe the need for moral leadership is more urgent now than never. Take that with a grain of salt because of when the study was done. 60% of observed unethical practices observed by employees were done by someone in a leadership position. And according to HBR, 23% of employees report feeling pressured, sometimes to always, to engage in behaviors that they know are wrong. Enron being able to cover up all of the accounting stuff they did, so many people had to know that was going on in order for that to have happened. And no one said anything. Volkswagen was probably their engineering team. Pfizer was probably just whoever was conducting the actual experiments. Now, common behaviors. I actually don't like these numbers very much because I don't think they're quite accurate. For instance, it says 3% report stealing. It is actually way higher. That is more like 3% of employees are caught stealing because we count time stealing, which is almost 100% of employees. And most employees will steal from their organization at some point, something physical. That can be taking Post-it notes or pens all the way up to money that they don't realize. Even doing something like driving the company car to lunch when you weren't approved to is stealing from the organization. You know what the most common deemed unethical behavior at organizations is? Gossip. If they count gossip as a counterproductive work behavior, CWBI, gossip is technically defined as like negative interactions, typically about someone else, right? Which, I guess that's technically true, but there's got to be a nicer term for gossip when it comes to because I feel like employees just talking about stuff going on is actually good. Okay. Now, one thing that's really going to drive this lecture is this question. The first question mainly. what is the purpose of an organization? And then what does it mean for an organization to be ethical? Because everything I just said here, we all agree was bad, but mostly we agree it was bad because it was illegal. Like all this stuff is illegal. These companies were saying they were doing something that they weren't doing, or doing something that they weren't telling people, or whatever. They broke the law, and in some way they're harming people, either physically or through money. They're harming the environment with Volkswagen, stuff like that. These are easy to look at and say this is bad. But when we say a company needs to operate ethically, a lot of times we don't mean just do what they say they're going to do, right? We want companies to do more than that generally. So the first thing we ask is, what is the purpose of an organization? And then what does it mean for an organization to be ethical? Now, I have to ask at least the people here in the audience, have I told you about Ford and Dodge and the Michigan Supreme Court case? No? Okay. If you don't have an immediate yes, then you definitely haven't heard it. So the question, what is the purpose of an organization, has actually been around for a long time. Ford, two of its biggest investors were the Dodge brothers, who, yes, went on to make Dodge, the trucks. Right? Chair almost killed me. First time I ever taught, I just fell on stage. It was like a real stage, and I just like tripped. It was awesome. I was like 26. I was embarrassed. Now, I don't care. I would just teach the class from the floor. So Ford had gotten massive. Now, Henry Ford, if you want to give him any credit, had a vision. He believed that vehicles were going to be important for the future of humankind. And he was damn well right, obviously. He was like, vehicles are going to be extremely important for the future of humankind. And Ford is the #1 producer of automotives. And he was like, I have a unique position here to advance humankind. I'm the one that can do this. Therefore, he announced to all of his shareholders, we are going to reduce dividends that I'm giving out to my shareholders. We are going to reduce the cost of the Model T so that it's cheaper for the customer to buy, right? And it's going to cost the organization money. Ford is going to take a hit on profits, and my shareholders are not going to get their dividends. Because here at Ford, I believe we have a purpose to help society. This is good for mankind. So he announced, we are going to do this. Yes, it is not the best thing for the company's profits, but it's good for everybody. And the Dodge brothers, who were shareholders, said, to hell you are. And they sued Ford. And their argument was, as shareholders, we bought into the company and gave you money, and you have a responsibility as the one running the company to run it to your best of your ability for profit, because that is the purpose of an organization. So we had two competing ideas. We had Ford, who owned the company, however, he has shareholders, so he's just the majority shareholder, saying the purpose of our company is to do more. It is to help mankind because we can. And the Dodge brothers, who are saying the purpose of your organization is to make money. It went to the Michigan Supreme Court, and the Michigan Supreme Court ruled in the Dodge brothers' favor. They said that the purpose of an organization is to make money, and that when the Dodge brothers gave you money and bought into your company, the kind of contract you entered in is that you as the CEO are going to run this the best of your ability to make money. If Ford made a mistake, if he said, I want to lower the price of cars because I think we'll sell even more, and that's going to be better for us in the long term, and we're going to make more money, and that didn't work out, that would have been okay. That's just the nature of business. But because he did it with the outward intention of it's going to hurt the company's profits, he lost. That case has been disputed since. It has gone on for a long, it is not a hard and fast fact. That is just the first case that this happened, and it spawned two views. Farrell at Auburn University writes probably the #1 management textbook, at least modern management textbook. And they state, there needs to be a movement away from self-serving corporation and a narrow focus on profit maximization. This is also often called the enlightened view by Michael Porter. He's a professor at Harvard University. He says essentially that organizations should not just be profit maximizing. They should do more, right? So he calls it the enlightened view, and he does it on purpose. He does it because it sounds like if you're not in the enlightened view, then you're living in the past, right? But, he got to coin the phrase. That's fine. Milton Friedman, who, if there's only one person that's probably more famous in business, like academics, than Michael Porter. Michael Porter's alive right now, and that's Milton Friedman. He's like the #1 IO psychologist of all time. Milton Friedman has the traditional view, which is the basic mission of business is to produce goods and services at a profit. And in doing this, business is making its contribution to society and, in fact, being socially responsible. So his view is, the traditional view essentially is that everything in society has a purpose. Your government has a purpose, like what it's supposed to do, with roads and schools and police and fire departments and all that stuff. And your churches and nonprofits have a purpose within your society, and they fulfill those roles. A lot of the roles that some people think businesses should be filling, and then businesses fill their own role. And the purpose of a business in a functioning society is to make money. And if they are making money, then they are being ethical. But the enlightened view is organizations have a responsibility to do more. So if you are Amazon and you're not giving to people and you're not using your power and resources to try to change the world for the better, if you're only focused on making money, then you're being unethical. And I am here to tell you, it's up to you. I can't tell you. There's no right and wrong. There's no theory that's going to tell you one's right and one's wrong. That's it, right? That's it. You just have to decide. And people kind of vote with their money. I can tell you a couple of things that are factual. That is, when organizations solely focus on profit we live in a capitalist society, but it's not a laissez-faire society. That means that it's capitalist with regulation, like I was saying. Really, since the Great Depression, we have regulation making sure that we prevent monopolies and stuff like that. If regulation is good and companies are focused on for-profit, it seems to be the best economically for everybody, which you could argue leads to the best quality of life. But that's in theory and typically in practice, but not always. And with the enlightened view, sometimes companies pretend they do what we call green pasturing, which is they say they're doing something for the better of society, but they're doing it as like a marketing ploy or to actually make money, right? However, a lot of companies have done really great things beyond the scope of what they needed to do that have been fantastic. If you look at Starbucks, and it's been propping up coffee fields all across the globe that have basically pulled entire, tiny nations out of poverty and villages. If you look at Starlink's been able to provide free internet to different parts of the world that basically had no access to internet before, and allowing like free use of their satellites in certain areas. And, Starlink's been really, really good at sending it in during crisis situations for free, and they don't have to do that. So things like that. So I'm not here to tell you what's right and wrong. I'm just here to present it all to you. So ethics, generally we define them as the standards of right and wrong that influence our behavior. And what makes it interesting is that they vary from person to person and country to country and culture to culture. Most of our ethics are based on our culture. There are some theories that say they are inherent to individuals, or not individuals, they're inherent to people as a whole. But then if you ask what is an inherent ethical practice that every culture holds, there's like not one. Even if you say like life, like not all cultures value life the same way. Not all cultures value freedom the same way, or ownership of property or anything like that. So really, your culture, your country, typically the values of your parents and stuff define your ethics. Now, looking at ethics and actual leadership, because this is essential workplace skills and we focus a lot on management here. Many CEOs fail to exhibit ethical leadership. 5.3% of CEOs were removed between 2012 and 2016, which is crazy. 5% in 4 years were removed for ethical lapses. in 1 year alone, more than 20%, so 1/5 of organizations will discipline or terminate high-ranking managers. And that was from 2022 for unethical behavior. And CEOs and all managers should support an ethical culture that embody their core values. Companies with weak ethical cultures tend to experience 10 times more misconduct. Misconduct can lead to tons of cost. The average discrimination lawsuit pays out close to $1 million. Employee theft costs companies like Walmart hundreds of millions of dollars. Just crazy. Walmart has like hundreds of millions in theft a year, and it's almost all employees. People actually, it's mostly your employees that steal. And like I said before, it's typically your managers and leaders that we see a lot of the ethical lapses in. And that's because they're the ones that have the most control, they can do the most damage, and they're the ones that are also much more easy to see. It's also worth noting that good unethical behaviors are hidden. And what I mean by good is ones that are pulled off well. That's why it's so hard to calculate crime or anything like that. That's like why we have no idea how much sexual harassment actually goes on in the organizations. We just have guesses. Or like, I can't tell you, anybody that tells you they know how much theft happens in organizations is lying, because you don't know. You can't know. That's what makes crime so hard, is like the greatest criminal of all time, no one knows. Characteristics of ethical leaders. It's largely disputed, and there's no finite set characteristics of what we define as an ethical leader. Now that makes sense, because it all depends on what you mean as an ethical leader and what is ethical, which again, like I said, I can't tell you. But I can tell you this. We have pretty good guesses about what makes a leader stick to the company's core values and make someone consistent in core values and make someone consistent with what is considered ethical around them. The first, knowledge and experience. People that have a lot of experience in an area and a lot of knowledge about the area tend to be viewed as more ethical, probably because often society values things as ethical and unethical, and the things that are unethical often lead to negative outcomes. So someone with a lot of experience has seen these negative outcomes and therefore has a better it's more likely to remain ethical. They tend to reflect the core values of the organization. When an organization is created, typically the original owner develops a mission, vision, and value statement. The value statement are often reflective of that leader, and they rarely change over time, or they change very, very slow. I mean, again, look at Wells Fargo. They went from like 1880 to like 2018 before they made any real changes. And so typically your leader should reflect those values. They are proactive, so they try to get ahead. Unlike, the SOX Act and Enron, they try to prevent things from happening. They're typically passionate about their organizations. And then if you want one defining characteristic, they're highly emotional intelligent. High emotional intelligence seems to lead to less ethical lapses. There was a story on the last slide I forgot to tell you when I was talking about culture. It's so crazy how things are like socially acceptable in some places and not socially acceptable in others. Like here, it's like unethical not to tip. Like we think you're a jerk. And I'm pretty anti-tipping culture, to be honest. I'm more of like you hired them, you should just pay them what I would normally tip them, right? Like all of it, to be honest. I'm pretty, now that's just my opinion. Don't go out there and be like, Dr. Smart said tipping's bad. I'm saying I tip too. I married a woman that's like tip 40%, like really, really heavy. But I'm like, oh, I really wish we just didn't have a heavy tipping culture, right? And in other places that's like rude. I'll never forget one of the craziest differences though between the United States and another culture was Dr. Oleg. He was getting his PhD at Oklahoma State when I was getting my master's, and I took his class, and he was the scariest Russian man. And he is now a professor at Texas Tech University. When he was, just fun facts about Dr. Oleg, he spoke really, really good English from a young age, and he was obviously very smart. And so he started working for a liquid glass company. And to this day, I don't know what the hell that is. And I've thought every time I tell this story, I should look up what liquid glass is before I tell the story. And then I said, no, I like the mystery. So he developed liquid glass. Well, that's what his company did. But because he spoke such good English, they put him in international marketing, and then he quickly rose the ranks in the international section. So he was doing all sorts of international work. At the age of 23, he told me that he was worth like several $1 million. They were paying him millions a year for what he was doing. He was very good at it. And then all hell broke loose. I'll tell you briefly. The Russian government asked him to turn over information on some international clients. And they said if he didn't, that they were going to persecute him on rape, which was just going to be false allegations. So he flew to the United States. The United States gave him asylum, and he started going to school at Pennsylvania University. Then he came to OSU, got his PhD, and now teaches at Texas Tech. And he's like, yeah, so there you go. That's the story he told us in class. Yeah, and I was like, damn, you are a scary Russian man. But really smart dude, really good guy. And he said he loves Russia, but that was crazy. And he's not coming back. And I was like, all right. No, he visits family, he says. But I don't know. I don't know. He said he visits family. He told me that's what happened. And then he left and he came here to the United States and did all that stuff. But he told me about some practices that he did while he was in Russia that were completely legal and completely commonplace that we can't do here. One, he made really, really good friends with everything in Russia is done through trains. It's a little different than here. There's lots of train networks in Russia. And he became friends with train yard workers, right? And he became friends with them. He paid them monthly to report to him what all of his competitors were having shipped in and out. So they would give him a report of what his competitors got in and what they got out. And he would pay them money, and then he would use that to understand what kind of contracts his competitors were bidding against and stuff, and like where they're buying, where they're selling from, like stuff like that. Just all strategic information. Here, that's against the law. You can't do that. You can't pay someone at a company to track information on a competitor and then give it to you. It's called, I'm blanking out on the term, but you're getting into some weird territory about, it's not bribery. It's close to bribery, actually. So anyway, so he did that. He also told me that he would set up fake accounts, call competitors, pretend to be a company interested in buying, and go through a whole process of setting up these large contracts with them just to see what they would bid on a contract, like what they would charge them. And he did that when he got information about a contract upcoming. He would try to mirror the contracts to match the contract that's coming up so he could have a guess at what this company was going to estimate so that he could undercut them. Now, that definitely is illegal. You can't do that. So, but that was just part of the game. And he told me, it's just lying. And is that unethical? And I was like, it feels unethical. And he's like, but it's not illegal in Russia, and everybody does it. And that's how it's done. And you would be seen as bad and dumb if you weren't competing that way to win. I'm also not saying anything negative on Russia. This is just his stories about different cultures, right? And so that's just what it is. So isn't that crazy? And he talks about all the changes and differences and teaching ethics in the United States. If you really want to learn ethics, learn it from Dr. Oleg. That was crazy. He taught supply chain management, but I bet he'd teach a hell of an ethics class. I was so scared presenting a lecture or presenting my presentation to him. He sat on the front row with his legs crossed. We were probably the same age, and he was dressed to the nines, man, and just so serious, but such a good guy. Something about an American Russian accent, scary. Yeah. So as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted by myself, about a story I forgot to tell. Leadership characteristics. So emotional intelligence is generally seen as like, again, the golden standard of what makes an ethical leader. These people have higher self-control, so when they know something's right and wrong, they do the right thing. They have high self-awareness, so they're less likely to make slip-ups. They handle stressful situations with a lot of unethical decisions are made in stressful situations, especially when you get what's called an ethical dilemma, where you have two competing ideas and you're unsure what to choose. And they have a good job at motivating other employees to do the right thing as well. In many ways, EI is now higher regarded than IQ when it comes to ethical leadership. It used to be very, very smart people tend to make less what is deemed unethical decisions. Again, it's typically because they see ramifications of actions, whereas criminals often don't see ramifications of actions. They're short term, and IQ comes with long-term thinking. Benefits of ethical leadership. I'll get through this fairly quickly here because I do want to get to the, yeah, we've already been lecturing for a little bit. I want to try to stop close to 6:30 or so. Generally, research actually shows that if your organization is viewed as ethical, you make more money, you keep your employees, things go better. I don't know enough about the research to tell you if this is United States specific, but I will say, as the United States economy has grown and people have had more buying power, we tend to value ethical leaders more. People will pay more money for a cup of coffee or a pair of shoes or whatever that they feel like is helping the environment or helping others or whatever. So in a lot of ways, it may be a slow cultural shift that's causing this to happen. But we do know that people tend to want to work at places that they feel are ethical. So your employees tend to have more loyalty to your organization. They'll work harder for something they believe in. I know a few universities, I'm not going to say obviously who, a few universities that like really try to work tuition prices and try to do like weird things with students to almost like catch them in weird fees. Like I know a university that you all pay tuition and fees, and they have all these fees that you can opt out of, but they never tell people that they can opt out of them. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. Like if they charge you $75 a semester for the writing center, you can technically say, I don't want the writing center and take that off your tuition, but they would never tell you that. You're just charged that. And then if you take it off, then your ID won't work when you go to the writing center, but no students know this. And so I would never feel comfortable working for a place like that. Some professors just don't care, but here I've felt very comfortable. I feel like they're actually very student first here. Now let's talk about leadership types here. There's two general approaches. There's what we call a compliance approach and an integrity approach. And typically, if you get really, really, really into this, which I don't expect anybody here to do, compliance people hate integrity people, and integrity people hate compliance people, and people are real passionate about it. So a compliance-based leadership style is there are rules, there are regulations that I have to follow. Things have to be done in this way, and I will do them in that way. And we are being very compliance focused. And as long as we do everything that we are supposed to do according to the letter of the law, then we are ethical and I'm good about it. Yay. Integrity-based leaders are more of the spirit of the law. Integrity-based is there are laws and rules and whatever regulations. However, we are trying to do what is best. We are trying to follow values, right? Almost more like I don't want to say feelings because that sometimes seems negative to people, but the spirit of the law versus the strictness of the law. My kids exemplify this to the extreme, and it is so annoying. My son is very integrity-based in that he is like, the spirit of the rules is what matters, and he will do what he thinks is best. Sometimes he bleeds into compliance where you have to be careful what you tell him because it becomes his life. That is like the rules for T. My daughter, on the other hand, is the best kid ever if you have a rule in place, if that makes sense. So if there's not a rule in place to stop her from doing something that's not good, she's going to do it. So you have to definitively be like, this is the rule. And if she hears that, she's not going to do it. She's not going to break the rules. She's pretty to it. But that is compliance versus integrity. Then we have three categories of ethical leadership. These basically get from worse to better if you judge being unethical as bad. So the first is an unethical leader. These are people they tend to see, they'll follow the rules as long as they're not hindering to them. So unethical leaders tend to be people that are okay with being unethical, and they generally actually follow the rules. It's just if they can break a rule and get away with it and it's going to be better for them, then they're more likely to do it. Pathetic leaders are in the in-between now. These people are not necessarily unethical, but they don't really care typically about ethics in the company. They generally view them as like relative and sometimes optional. They'll typically follow the rules for the most part, but they're definitely not going to be integrity-based. And they're not going to be strictly compliance-based, but they tend to be tighter to compliance, where like the rules are there and I'll generally follow them, but they may have lapses here and there. A true ethical leader is what we consider somebody who's fully compliance-based, or they're integrity-based to the point that they don't deviate off their own values and they really, really stick to it. So it just kind of gets better and better and better. Now, I should say about integrity and compliance, the complaint about compliance is it's kind of cold. You're following very, very strict rules. And what if these rules are bad, right? So if you work for a company that has things in place to make you do terrible things and you're just very compliance-based, then you technically could do bad things, right? It's like the New Orleans Saints with the, what was it? Oh my God, the bounty system, right? That was like put into place and people could follow it. And I don't think it was officially a rule, but kind of like a social rule that people were following. That's very compliance-based. Now, the problem with integrity is you're really relying on your own beliefs and values and ability to judge the situation independently. And so sometimes there's rules in place to protect certain things that you may not see. And so these people, what if you're in a bad mood or whatever, your integrity can vary, whereas compliance is supposed to be static and stay the same. Most people operate fairly in a blend between the two. Boom. Now, because I've been lecturing so long and we have a few slides left here, what I'm going to do, this is the plan for the rest of the lecture. We're going to pause here. We're going to come back. The rest of the lecture will take about a third as long, maybe less than what I've already talked about. Then I will show you the case study. I'll only give you a little bit of time to read the case study, and then I'll go over it so you all can steal my answers or whatever. And then we'll be done. We'll do the lecture question. We'll get out of here. Cool. So it is 6:27. I'm going to get more water and run to the restroom. I'll come back at like 6:33, 6:32, and then we'll start the rest and be done. And go home and watch the Patriots play somebody that they're going to beat. So we'll get out of here. I'll go home, watch the Patriots game in peace, and I'm going to get to go because I'm not going to cook for myself. Not right now. I'll cook for when I got to cook. I want to cook a bunch of food for a lot of people. When I just cook for myself, I'm like, this is dumb. It's so expensive, honestly, nowadays to cook one meal. I just go buy food. It is. When I was living alone, it was a little different. I became the expert at buying one stick of butter, but now, big sizes of everything. So making ethical decisions as a manager. Now, it would be so easy if when I said make an ethical decision, it was like, this is the bad thing and this is the good thing, and it's just a battle of willpower to do the right thing. That would be so easy, right? So easy. When I used to play blackjack, just for fun, I'm not a gambler. I actually think gambling is completely stupid, entirely stupid. Blackjack was way harder for me before I knew all the data behind it, because every time you'd get like a 15 or a 16, you'd be like, oh, do I hit? Do I not hit? I don't know, a decision to make. And then when I got all the decisions figured out and I have the statistical trees all memorized and I know when to hit and when to not, it was simple. Good decision, bad decision. And it's just willpower to make the good decision. Unfortunately, that's not how it works for most of the time as managers. Most of the times you are faced with multiple shades of gray, and there may be clearly bad decisions and there may be clearly good decisions, but it becomes really, really hard to pick between those good decisions. So we have what we call ethical dilemmas, situations in which you have to decide whether to pursue a course of action that may benefit you or your organization, but is unethical or even illegal, or when two right values conflict. Did I ever tell you about my father having to decide to fire or keep that guy on staff that was having a degenerative disease. Did I tell you that story in the past? No? Great. I'm going to tell you now. Some ethical dilemmas are super simple. Some are not super simple. They're low stakes, I should say. Sometimes they're more complicated. My first job ever was working for my father as I did like landscaping stuff. I was like 14, right? He paid me $5 an hour during the summer because I didn't have school to ride with him to Ponca City where his nursing home was and to pull weeds and buff the floors all day. And one day on the way to his work, my dad was like real solemn and real serious. And he looked at me and he said, Seth, I want to know your opinion on something. And I said, sure. Pops. I don't remember what I called him when I was younger. Something, I always call him something dumb usually. And he said he had an employee who was one of his nurses. Most of my dad's employees are nurses at a nursing home. And this employee had a degenerative disease. He was getting progressively worse. It would eventually start affecting his cognitive ability. Eventually. The problem was we don't know when exactly. One of those things that could be a year, could be 10 years, right? But it was coming on. This person, as a nurse, administers drugs to people. And if you're in a nursing home, you're already in a very sensitive state. Messing up a drug delivery is death. Could kill somebody. They don't get something they should. They get something they shouldn't, kills them. So my dad was in a really tough place because he was talking to this guy, been an excellent employee for a long time. And he was like, this guy's like, my disease, I have this. It's eventually going to get worse. No wife, one son. Because of the disease, it causes physical changes to the way he looks. And his son was starting to get embarrassed to be around him and didn't want him to take him to school anymore. He was telling my dad, my son asked me to drop him off before I get to school so he can walk in so nobody sees me and stuff like that, which, my dad has a son at the time and he's telling me all this. And no job, insurance is rough, so money's tight and everything. Hard, he's got this problem, so if he loses this job, it's going to be really hard to get another job. And so my dad was coming to me and he was like, I don't know what to do. Because if I keep him on staff, I am kind of rolling the dice with a lot of people's lives. Because who knows when it's going to get bad. But firing him, obviously, is devastating to this person. But also, I could be firing him for something that won't even be an issue for 10 years, right? Or longer at all, right? And truly didn't know what to do. And my dad, who is not an emotional man at all, I was like truly distraught. And all I could think, even at age 14, is I was like, this is a lot for me right now, man. And it's like I do not know what to tell you to do. I think my 14-year-old answer was, because I definitely was leading with more with my heart at the time. And I was like, you should talk to him and just have him tell you when he thinks it starts to get bad to let you know and to let him go. But now as an adult, I think from a business owner's perspective, you can't put people's lives at risk like that. Like, I don't know. I think you'd have to let him go. I don't know. I've had students tell me they should move him to a different role. And I have to tell you, it's not that simple. You can't, he's a nurse. Payroll's your biggest expense. If you're not producing for the company, like you're just drag on the payroll. So like, what are we doing? So I don't know. And the really most annoying thing about that is I was 14 at the time. So that was 20 years ago. And I asked my dad about 3 years ago when I started telling this story, hey, remember this story? And he said, I do remember that story. And I said, what did you do? And he said, I don't remember. And that has annoyed the hell out of me for 3 years. So I just want a damn answer. I want to know, oh, he worked for me for 16 years and then I let him go. There was a cure. He was fine. I don't know, something. But I heard that and I thought, wow, what a dilemma. And to a lot of you sitting at home, there may be a clear answer to you right now. You may just have a definitive answer. But no matter what, there's a feeling of two right values conflicting. And so it's like, what do you do? And we do our best to resolve ethical dilemmas. There is a few scientific approaches that have been used, theorized, to help resolve these. And again, it's not my job to tell you which one's the best one. It's not my job to tell you what to do in ethical dilemmas because I can't. I can just explain them and say that you're going to run into them as managers and you're just going to have to deal with them. So these are the 4 most common approaches. We have what's called the utilitarian approach. That's probably what most people operate on in the United States. That is guided by you do what is the greatest good for the greatest number of people. You make the decision in this ethical dilemma that helps the most people. In my dad's case, it would have been to fire the employee because it protects the most people. That's the utilitarian approach. Then we have the individual approach. This one's interesting to me. I don't have a strong of a grasp on it as I used to. I used to have a lot of great examples for it. But it's guided by what results in the individual's best long-term interest, which ultimately is in everyone's self-interest. So the idea is you were thinking long-term, what's going to be best. In my dad's case, it may have been short-term, you may feel good about this person still having a job. Long-term, if things were to go bad, it could be bad for him, for them. I mean, this guy would open himself up to lawsuit. Like, it would all be a whole deal. So that's the individual approach. Then we have the morals, rights, and the justice approach, which are fairly simple. The morals, rights approach is the idea that there are fundamental human rights to human beings. In the United States, we have a Bill of Rights, Bill of Rights to protect these. Right to liberty, life, liberty, privacy, health, safety, and due process. And the idea is an ethical dilemma. You have to see if any of these violate any of these rights. If they do, which one violates them less, essentially, because sometimes you have to make 2 decisions and both are going to be bad. And that's the decision you go with. And then you have the justice approach, which is you do what is fair and equal. Whatever you believe is fair and equal, that's the decision you're supposed to make. Way easier said than done. I used to give a much more messed up example of a dilemma and how complicated they could be. If you ever take like an ethics class at a psychology department, they'll give you this fun one in some variation, which is like a cop is following a car and the car in front of them has a famed surgeon in the front seat and his young daughter in the back, and the car crashes off the edge of like a mountain and goes down into the water across a bunch of rocks, and the cop has to decide to go down the mountain and get the people or to stay up there. That's the first ethical dilemma, because the protocol is the cop is supposed to wait for backup because it's unsafe. You're not supposed to be another victim. So you have to decide, are you going to be compliance-based and you're going to wait for backup to come to make sure you're safe and all that stuff? Or are you going to be integrity-based and be like, as a person, I'm supposed to risk my life to save, you know? And then once you get down there, there's the, of course, do you save the surgeon who's going to save potentially hundreds of other people or thousands of other people, or do you save the young girl, right? And your heart is like, save the young girl because save children. But the logical thought is, well, we know he is going to save people, right? So that's a fun one they like to do. Everybody does the same thing. When I ask students, they all say the same thing. Go down there and get the girl. That's always what they say. Now, I'm not telling you which of these approaches is best, but I will tell you the approach that I typically give my students, and I probably talked about this in decision making as well, is what we call the stakeholder view. It's what you use in ethical decision making as well. And that is, these are all your stakeholders. Everybody that has some sort of stake in your company. Well, technically there's more than this, but this is our best to get everybody from internal task and the general environment. You take all these people, you decide as an organization and as a person who the most important are. You literally rank them. Is it your employees, and then your customers, and then your suppliers, or whatever, the environment? You put them all on a list, and you make the ethical decision that benefits the people higher up on the list or harms them the least. So you decide who the most important people are in the company and outside the company that have a stake or have a share in this company somehow. And then you make the best decision for the people highest up on the list. That's the stakeholder view. That's the view they teach in a lot of ethics classes to business managers. And it really makes sense if you break it down, honestly. I have an eyelash in my eye. It's so ironic that our eyelashes are so close to our eyes and yet so detrimental. Gosh. I don't need glasses. I can do this blind. That is not true. I can't even read the screen right now. But I mostly have this memorized, so it's fine. All right, we're going to get to the last few here. We're going to get out of here. Well, we're going to talk about the lecture or the case study. How organizations can promote ethics. So I can't tell you what's ethical and what's not, but I can say this. If you create an ethical climate, it's going to be better for your organization as a whole. There's a few ways you can do that. 2, 3, and 4 all feed into 1. When we say create a strong ethical climate, really, you have to do these things to do that. One that I didn't put up here is your leaders have to exemplify whatever you want to be ethical. Again, most unethical behaviors that are reported are about the leaders. Most employees state that their leaders will do things or expect them to do something that they wouldn't do themselves. And most employees say that they see their managers do bad things, essentially. So have managers that do or that are exemplifying the behaviors you want. Screen prospective employees. Again, remember the bad apple and bad barrels approach. If you get one bad employee, it is going to harm all the others. So get a really strong mission, vision, value statement, and then hire people that fit that. I can tell you, especially if the job market gets tighter, and unfortunately for any of you that are wanting to get new jobs after college, it is much more difficult to get hired now. As in, the process of being hired is so extensive. It has become so much nowadays. And it is because, unfortunately for you all, people like me have been screaming and producing research that's like, it's really, really hard to fire an employee, but it's really hard to fire an employee, but it's really easy not to hire an employee. And you need to get the right people in, because if you get the wrong people in, you will burn that whole place to the ground. So be really, really careful who you're letting into your organization to make sure that they're all fitting the behaviors that you want to see. Institute ethics codes and training programs. They actually have, some companies do ethics compliance officers. I actually can't tell you if that actually helps at all. I've never seen any research that shows that those are needed, but they are out there. You can get a job doing it. But a lot of organizations create ethics codes of what's expected. I will say organizations having strict codes that everybody can see and follow a line with tends to work better, because people can just see what they can and cannot do. And then reward ethical behavior, particularly protect whistleblowers the best you can. We've got a lot better at organizations at protecting whistleblowers, but it's still not perfect. You all know what a whistleblower is? If not, I'll say it just in case. If your company's, the people that tend to know what your company's doing wrong are the people within the organization. If they report that your company's doing something wrong, either internally to someone within your organization or externally, they are a whistleblower. So if my boss is doing something bad and unethical, and then I talk to my boss's boss and tell on them, I'm a whistleblower. If my company's doing something illegally and I go to a federal agency and I tell you they're doing this illegally, I'm a whistleblower. Whistleblowers, you want them protected, because as an organization, when you're trying to promote ethics, you want employees to feel comfortable to report bad behaviors that are happening. If they don't feel comfortable, they won't report them. What they'll typically do is leave, and then things will keep getting bad until they boil over. Every time, not every time, hold on, back up, cut that from the recording. Future Seth editor. I actually don't edit these. I edit my other ones because I record them at home alone. But these, you guys just get raw and filtered class. Oftentimes, when I'm dealing with cases and research or whatever of someone who's committed sexual harassment at organizations, they are caught not on the first person they sexually harass. It is someone getting harassed. They leave the organization because they can't stand it. This person gets worse. It gets worse and worse until they do something so egregious or they mess with the wrong person that calls them, that snaps it down right there. If you have good whistleblower protection, you're more likely to hear about these problems happening and snip them out before it's a problem. And organizations are protected. As an organization, if one person in the organization commits sexual harassment just because we're on it on someone else, you get notified immediately and you do something about it, your organization's not really open to lawsuit. Not typically, unless you did something egregious to let it happen. That employee is in trouble, not you. But if you let it go, you get what's called a hostile work environment, and then you can be sued. So protect whistleblowers. Easier said than done. More whistleblower laws came about because of Enron, because that could have been busted so quick. We're going to pause right there. Let's pull up our case study. Stop sharing for a second so I can get it pulled up here. You do have an ethics homework. There's no chapter to read, so you know that for 100% certainty, all the questions come directly from my slides or from the words of my mouth. Boom. Your case study is in, let me find it here. Yes. Case study 5 is under assignments, right there. Oh my gosh. Don't you think it's funny? The Enron, for ethics, it's funny. I don't know if that logo is copyrighted anymore. There's a little R right there. Is it? Anyway, under assignments, we'll do lecture question 14 here in a minute. Case study 5, this one's hidden right now because I have to adjust the point values, which I'll do right after class. So in here, this document, boom, I'll pull it up bigger because I already downloaded it. Briefly read this case study. I'm going to give you guys just like 5-6 minutes, around 7 o'clock or a little after. We will discuss these questions down here. And for your homework, you are answering these questions. You can do it in this document if you want. I don't care. If you do answer your question in this document, please give me plenty of space before you answer it so that I can tell it's just not my question. Sometimes people start typing like right here, and that drives me crazy. I don't know why. I'm going to bold those. I'll share my screen in case anybody's looking off of it, but I'm going to reread it as well. So you got to read at my pace. If you remember my dad's story, then this case study should seem kind of reminiscent. So when I wrote this, I think in 2024, yes, 2024, I wanted to create something similar to that. So that was kind of my driving factor of this. So the general idea here, and I want to go through and talk about a few things here because we are even outside of ethics. Am I still sharing? Okay, good. So the general premise here is Sarah's the person we're following and who you're essentially making decisions for. Tom, I believe is his name. Yeah. Tom has been an excellent employee for a long time, over 15 years, according to this, been very, very good. But over the last year, now that's an important note. I actually went back to double check how long this person had been there. And over the last year, this person has had issues. That's a long time. This isn't like, if this was like a week or 2 weeks or even a quarter after 15 years, my general belief is, and I think most of you, I would encourage you to say, you gotta let that go to a degree. They've been there so long, they've been so successful. This has been over a year. That's quite a while. I chose a year because that's a very fun niche of, has this been too long or not, right? So over a year has had issues, significant issues, enough that other employees are bringing the problems to the manager's attention. The manager's been there for a while, 10 years. This person's been there for 15 years. We can generally assume she's been over this person for those 10 years, so she probably knows them fairly well. I have to be so careful with how I talk about this case because I cannot tell you what is ethically correct, what is ethically wrong, how to think about this, how to not think about this. Because for some of you, the fact that they've known each other for 10 years and that he's been there for 15 years should mean a lot. And you may think things like, Sarah knows that he's going through a tough time personally. And you may think those are things I should put a lot of weight into. Other students, I will tell you now, will have the mindset of the personal problems are outside the business. This is just business. It doesn't matter if we're friends. I have to treat you as an employee, and that is separate. When we get to the ethical dilemma, they're going through these problems, are doing terrible, and Sarah knows that it appears the problems are coming from his tough time personally. Wife battling a severe illness, that should seem, make sense to you all based on my story. Emotional and financial strain has taken a toll on him. And despite this declining performance, Sarah feels a deep sense of loyalty and compassion towards Tom, given his long-term commitment. Important to note, unless Tom disclosed this to HR or to her privately, there's kind of like weird, like she can't ask this stuff unless Tom tells her, which is always kind of interesting. If they're friends, she probably knows it. If he tells her outside the organization, then it gets weird because you can't like use that or bring it up a lot with HR. It's a weird line you have to walk when it comes to this stuff. If he's open about it or he discloses it to HR, it's a little bit different. So he's going through this emotional time here. Now, I put a few potential courses of actions and I ask you to discuss them. You can do something outside of this. I'm kind of okay with telling you what I would do based on just, it's going to be all theory and science driven. Sorry, that's how I'd make my decisions. But then I want you all, there's nothing I'm going to tell you coming up here that you can't do differently, basically. So question 1, how should Sarah balance her responsibility to maintain high performance standards with her empathy for Tom's personal situation? If you were an advisor for Sarah, as a manager, she still has to have high performance, no matter what you believe an organization's purpose is. We can say it's to do more, we can say it's for money or whatever. If she's not performing well and the company's not making money, it won't be around or she won't be around. So to a degree, she has to maintain high performance. She also has emotional empathy towards Tom. So if you were to give Sarah advice, what would you say? You could tell her to neglect the sympathy entirely, be like, it's separate. You could be there supporting him emotionally as a friend, but it's separate from the organization, or something within the organization that could help them out. Now, what are the potential risk and benefits of each course of action Sarah's considering? Let's look at her potential risk or potential courses of action. The first one is standard formal disciplinary action. To our knowledge, he has not been warned or anything at this point, at least it doesn't say it, meaning none of your answers should be just firing. You can't typically just fire out of nowhere, especially if he's been there that long. You need some sort of PIP. You need to have some sort of first touch base. Otherwise, you're opening yourself up to lawsuit. So do that. It's also just generally good. You don't want people walking on pins and needles that they're just going to get fired one day. So formal disciplinary action is just like it sounds. The benefit is this is clear cut. It's fair. It's standard organizational practice. You don't have to really worry about special treatment. Everybody will know that this is good, how it's kind of done. The cons of that are it could be seen as insensitive to some employees. It's obviously going to stress Tom. It may not actually help him get better. It might make him get better. He might get better because of this. It's also likely you're going to lose him. His performance is going to get worse, and then he's gone. Remember, this isn't just about Tom emotionally. Tom is also, if you want to think about it like critically and from a calculated standpoint, Tom has been a great employee for 15 years. You would prefer him continue to be a great employee. So you want to hopefully get him out of the funk. Personalized support plan. Create a personal support plan for Tom. So essentially this is Sarah creating generally a PIP, kind of. This isn't quite a PIP because a PIP assumes that if you don't complete it, you'll be fired. This is something that she's changing his work environment for the better. Assigning less demanding tasks, more flexible work hours. This shows compassion for Tom. It may be exactly what he needs to get out of the funk. However, it could show favoritism. You're also committing to getting worse production, essentially. You're also committing to doing this for every other employee in the future. Open dialogue and meditation. This is basically having an open and honest conversation with Tom. Again, you have to be careful. If he hasn't disclosed any of this stuff in a corporate setting, you got to be careful what you talk about. If he offers it voluntarily, it's completely different. But you can discuss his performance issues while expressing support. And then this is essentially working with them to come up with some sort of solution, right? Now, this encourages transparency and collaboration. However, there's no guarantee it's going to lead to performance improvement. There's no guarantee that you're actually going to hear what the root cause is from Tom. Again, you're committing to doing this with all employees, which maybe that's not a bad thing. And you're also prolonging whatever this is. If you discuss with them, you never know what answer you're going to get out of this, essentially. But it is a first touch base. For seeking external support, so this is going to like when I have students that have small issues, I tend to deal with them myself. When I have students that have major issues, my first course of action is to send them to the student assistant program we have here, because they have more power. They can do big decisions that I can't do. And they have more training and practice with it. So this is essentially externalizing it, okay? This could be seen as insensitive. This often takes the most amount of time because you're involving a third party. However, you're not firing them. You are trying to give them the resources. Good to go. Now, how could Sarah ensure that any action she takes is perceived as fair and just by the rest of the team? Honestly, the hope is you have policy in place beforehand or a precedent beforehand. That's the easiest way. But if you do not, you're going to have to be a good leader. This is a hard question to answer. You're going to have to be a good leader. You're going to have to work with your other employees and let them know. You have to be so careful that you're working to hold everybody at a high performance standard. You're working with all your employees. Maybe you do something like have a touch base with each employee so that it doesn't appear that. You have something you want to say? You're getting a little deep.
In my head, I'm thinking, I work in a work environment that's similar, and if I get there, then interesting how you handle it. So I've been in this situation.
Yeah, it's hard.
I'm trying to decide if what I did was right.
Well, it's hard because you want it to appear fair. You definitely want to do the same thing for everybody or offer the same resources for everybody, no matter what they're going through. And that's why it's so difficult. Employees do not like their situation was different than yours answer very much. Should Sarah involve higher management or HR in the situation? If so, how? This is a trick question. HR should be involved. Full stop. You should get HR involved. If you are going to change any sort of their performance issues or performance plan, if you're worried about them potentially getting on a PIP in the future, just touch base. If you have a good HR department, my wife and most of my friends that work for companies, they have good HR departments. If there's anything going on, they just touch base with HR. It covers your ass. It makes sure you're doing everything right. It's just a good base. Higher management's an interesting one. If this employee's been there for a long time and you're getting close to firing them, I would definitely consider talking to higher management at one point. If you're managing this yourself, remember, as a manager, you are hired to make decisions and not put problems on the people above you. So often you are hired to do this right here. So if higher management doesn't need to be involved, don't. If this is a situation in which you believe they need to, or if you're in this situation, you know the manager's a little better and higher management's gonna want to know this stuff, then you should. But keep in mind that Tom's been there for 15 years, so he knows a lot of people, and a lot of people know him, and he's been successful for 15 years. So if you're getting close to making a decision that's going to require Tom to go away, I would definitely involve higher management. If you're just working with Tom to get his situation ironed out for his betterment, you probably don't need to tell HR that or tell higher management that. I don't know why you would really need to involve them. That would just seem like you're. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
What's up? For which, just in general? Yeah, it depends on the program you have. So like here at NSU, honestly, the student assistant program is very similar to what I'm talking about here. They work with me and I get them involved when I need to, and they can just come in and come out. There are some employee assistance programs that want to come in and just take over the situation entirely. And then it's almost like I don't even know how to explain it, like a wall. Yeah.
Instead of being handled by the company, you are a big enough situation in which you don't want to handle.
Yeah, it puts like a wall between you and them. Like now I don't really see the situation. You're transferred out. I can't tell you what to do. It kind of depends on your program here. When you're involving HR and higher management, you don't necessarily need to involve the assistance program yet. Yeah. But there are times too. Now, typically if you have a good company, they've given you training on when to do it. So here, we literally, I go to these meetings, right, that I have to do 3 times a year or whatever for teaching, and they tell me if a student has X, Y, and Z, or you feel like it's getting out of your scope, contact them. So I have specific parameters of when I go to them, right? So she has to make the decision of, is that the direction I want to go? Do I want to push him there and just be done with it, right? Now, question 5 kind of ties into all this, but I want to touch on something here. You don't have to do any of these. You could have your own. This is my opinion on the limited information we have. And this is what sucks about case studies, unless I want to write them 60 pages long, is if you don't know these people and you're not there, the devil's in the details, right? And if you know Tom and you know this working environment, and if I have a team of 8 people and Tom's one of them and I know the other 7 super well, and I'm like, well, nobody's going to think I'm giving him unfair treatment because we're all buddy-buddy and I know them. This is all different, right? So on the information we have here, my first thought would be clearly you start with number 3 in some sort of open dialogue, something. Even if you're not really committing to 3, you do something. Then I personally would move to, after talking with him, a more collaborative yet asynchronous decision, number 2. So that means I've spoke with you, we've talked about your problems, you've talked about what may help you or may not help you, but ultimately the final plan is I've laid the plan out. So yeah, and it has to be on paper. This may be a time to involve HR. If it seems that way, HR should be here. It depends on how serious we're taking 3. If you're taking 3 as like a real definitive management step, then yeah. In my mind, I'm always like, am I making this like a let's sit down and talk as friends and relaxed? Or am I making this a set down, this is an official moment, right?
Work related, or are you friends?
Yeah, I know. That's the difference, right? But again, if I knew them well, then I would know more, right? I've been friends with my boss and I've been friends with my employees, and sometimes we would talk outside of work, and that's more of an open dialogue, relaxed. Inside work, you should send emails, put things on your calendar when you're going to discuss, a one-on-one with Tom, right? And have all of that stuff there. You can record meetings, things like that. That's all fine, as long as you're transparent about the fact that they're being recorded, which that's why Zoom screams at you that it's recording when you turn it on. But I would go to 2, and ultimately it would be an asynchronous plan from me in the end. So it would be informed with you, but then I would create the final plan and be like, this is what you're doing. And then this is the hard part. You follow the plan, and if it's not improved, then formal disciplinary action. And that is something that me as a manager would feel comfortable instigating, because I feel like I could do that consistently with all employees. That does not show favoritism. That shows that I spoke with him, we came up with a plan, he didn't reach the plan, he was fired. And if you have a problem, I will talk to you about it, we will develop a plan, and if you don't complete it, you're fired. Very standard. Some of you all may disagree. Some of you all may give Tom multiple years or whatever to get things figured out, or however much time you think, or have a completely different solution. I don't know, but these situations are hard. Cool? Cool. Few things, then I'll give you a lecture question, and we'll get out of here. This week, lecture question due, homework due, case study due. Next week, final business project and peer evaluations. Additionally, the bonus, the extra credit assignment with the Discord stuff, I send out the second survey this week. You have until the end of the semester to do it. I send it out at the beginning of the semester. It takes you like a couple of minutes. I will post it in the announcements tab. I will also post it on the Discord server, and you just click it, you fill it all out. It'll make sure that you get it done right. Don't worry. It's going to ask you for some sort of ID. I can't remember what it is. It's like birthday and initials of your mother or something like that. I don't know. It's so important that you put that ID number in correctly, though, because I have to match your first test or first survey with your second survey, but I can't take any names because you have to be anonymous. So do your codes correctly, please. Otherwise, I have to throw your data away. You actually still get the credit. This is just for me. So when you complete the second survey, it's going to transfer you to a different study, and that's where you put your name. I look at the second survey to give you extra credit, but it'll keep you disconnected from your answers, if that makes sense. It automatically links you to somewhere to fill your name out, but it's not linked to your answers. So I don't know what you said. If you say terrible things about Discord and me, I'll be like, one of my students hates me, but I won't know that it's Jet. I'll just know that Jet did the assignment, right? Unless only Jet does the assignment, and then I would know, but that's unlikely. So I'll send that out. Please do that to make sure you get your extra credit if you want to. And I think that's it. Oh, next week, we're not going to have class. I will record the lecture. It's just a 20-minute deal on getting everything submitted and all that stuff and making sure all your stuff's formatted correctly. I will post it. However, at 5:30 next week, I will set in the Zoom room in case anybody has questions. Okay, I will be in my office downstairs. I'll jump on Zoom. I'll do my work. And if you have any questions or anything, you can come say, hey. Cool? Cool. I do have a lecture question. I'm thinking about, I had a couple. Do you have a lecture question? Do you have a lecture question? You haven't talked all class. What's your lecture question? Oh, man. No. I don't want Ole Miss to send me some random letter because this is on YouTube and be like, hey, quit. Actually, it'd probably be more likely LSU. Ole Miss would be like, yeah, get them. Yeah, get them. It's hard to come up with I had a, ooh. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. This is the one I usually do, so it'll be boring, and we'll do it. These 4 approaches to resolving ethical dilemmas, which one do you believe, if you had to choose an approach, is best, or which one you tend to use? Most people use them all to a degree, but between the utilitarian approach, the individual approach, the morals rights approach, and the justice approach, what do you think is the best? The most common answer is the utilitarian approach because you're all Americans, I think. So there you go.
What slide number is that?
It is slide 18. It's right there. Boom. That's your lecture question. Due Sunday. You all are fantastic people. I may not see the people that are in class and the people that are online that are hearing me talk live right now. I may not talk to you live again. So I seriously appreciate everybody taking my class. This is like, I was so blessed early in life in that in my early 20s, I was like, I want to be a professor. And I did all the stuff to try to become a professor. And then when I became a professor, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted to do with my life. This worked out great. So I love my job and I can't do it without you guys. And my whole life, I've always been so afraid, especially because I started teaching young, that I would have like a disruptive class or someone would give me hell or something like that. You know, it's like a fear. I've now taught like 30 or 40 courses, something like that. And that has never happened once. I have always had fantastic students and it's been great. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate your all's time and being out here late on a Monday. So have a good rest of your semester. Good luck with finals or whatever you're doing. I'll be in contact if you need me. Thank you all.